All right. Hi, everyone. Aloha. My name is Kanani Kea, and I'm the moderator for this session titled Improving Site Stormwater Compliance with Inspections, Data Analytics, Training, and Enforcement Tools. Please use the Q&A feature during the presentation to ask any questions you may have. At the end of the presentation, we will have a few minutes for the speakers to answer your questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the speakers for this session. Dustin Harbottle, Jennifer Little, and Ashley Endo all work together as part of the City and County of Honolulu Stormwater Quality Program. Dustin Harbottle is a civil engineer with the City and County of Honolulu Department of Facility Maintenance Stormwater Quality Division. The Stormwater Quality Division's programs and initiatives are supported by a broad team of many local and national consultants with various specialties and expertise. Jacobs supports the Stormwater Quality Division in providing third-party construction site inspections and stormwater technical training. Ashley Endo is a water resources engineering professional who grew up on Oahu and joined the Jacobs Honolulu office in November of 2019. Ashley completed her PhD research in industrial and systems engineering at the University of Southern California. Jennifer Little with Jacobs is an environmental scientist and lead third-party construction inspector. She has over 15 years of professional experience in pre-construction surveying, environmental permitting, and NPDES construction inspections and stormwater compliance. Please help me welcome Dustin, Ashley, and Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining. In this presentation, we're going to discuss 3 separate programs the City and County of Honolulu currently has and how they benefit and work together. And those programs are inspections, training, and enforcement. So again, my name is Jennifer Little and I work for Jacobs. I'm the lead third-party construction inspector. And so I'm going to start off talking about we call it 3PI and our program with inspections. So basically the whole goal is improving stormwater compliance. And with the third-party construction inspection program, it was adopted by the Department of Facility Maintenance Stormwater Quality Division in 2016. We have 7 inspectors that are zoned throughout Oahu, and we perform visual inspections on both public and private projects. The public projects being the city capital improvement projects, and then the private ones could be homeowners, businesses, anything that's not a city project, but all have city permits. We use a reporting database that's online where we can upload our reports in the field called Cloud Comply. And with Cloud Comply, we can again upload reports, and as we're uploading reports, we have fields where we can elect how the project is doing. So basically, we're able to assess the BMP deficiencies, the individual site scoring of the site. So we'll assign it a grade, as you will. And then we can also look at the average contractor scoring also. So with that data analysis, we can use that for training purposes and also to see where we are in the program effectiveness and where we can make some changes and what we need to improve on. So Cloud Comply, again, like I said, allows us to be able to upload our reports and different data into an online database, and we can use iPads, iPhones, Androids, laptops, etc. And we're also allowed to PDF and email reports to the contractors really easily with this program. And with the analytics, we can extract data. So as we're putting in how BMPs are working, we're allowed to extract that data. And I use Microsoft Power BI to develop that into graphs so we can see how we're doing as a program. As you can see with this pie chart, you can see our top deficiencies as a program. So what we're seeing in the field mainly as deficient are stormwater inlet protection, compost stock and berms, which are often perimeter controls for smaller projects, concrete waste management, street sweeping and vacuuming, and spill prevention and control. So these are the top deficiencies that we're seeing program-wide throughout the island of Oahu. And that's with our 7 inspectors all going out to all these public and private projects and the average of these deficiencies here. Another graph that we're able to see is the total number of deficiencies over time. So we can also analyze the data over time. This was from the beginning of our program in 2016 to sometime last week. So as you can see, when the city adopted the new water quality rules in August of 2017, we had a spike in our deficiencies. And that's when our program became into full swing. So we were seeing everybody at that point. But as you can see over time, those deficiencies have decreased nicely. So we know our program is effective, and hopefully that arrow continues to go down. So recently we decided to do a pilot virtual contractor training, and we chose a select group. And also with our cloud compliant data, we were able to pick who we thought would be good candidates of this pilot training. And again, the focus was stormwater. So I didn't want to call anybody out, so I just labeled them, you know, contractor A, B, C, D, et cetera. What we did to pick these contractors is I did a data analysis on cloud compliant and looked at the total number of locations, and then that site scoring or average effectiveness rating. So what that score was, every time we did an inspection, the average of that. So this pulls the average grade, so to speak. So what we were trying to do is pick, you know, a lot of locations with a lower score. So we would have chosen, this one has 29 locations, but their score was low. So that was, you know, part of our pilot group. And I'm going to turn it over to Ashley now to talk a little more about our training efforts. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jen. I'm Ashley, and I'll be discussing how analytics were used to identify topics for the contractor training. So Jacob's role with this task was to support the city in exploring whether providing for a virtual training appears to improve stormwater construction site stormwater knowledge and compliance. So the virtual contractor training pilot that Jen mentioned was a 1-hour training for the field personnel of the pre-selected contractors in topics of construction site stormwater compliance and best management practices, or BMPs. It took place virtually through MS Teams in October of this year. And the purpose of this training was to pilot a course for these selected contractors to really evaluate this mode of training and to also try to measure learning and its effect on field compliance. So training analytics through analyzing data from the course called Erosion and Sediment Control Plan ESCP Coordinator course helped us to identify topics for the pilot course. The ECP Coordinator course is an e-learning course that's offered by the City and County of Honolulu, and it's for those who wish to become certified as an ESCP Coordinator during construction. It's required for individuals who work on projects for the city, and individuals need to be recertified every other year. So we thought that this course would be a good would have good data to use to look at topics for the course. So using the data analysis software Power BI, we looked at those contractors who took this ECP Coordinator course, and we looked to see trends in low scoring questions from the quiz that was part of the course. And based on the low scoring questions, we were able to identify topics for the virtual pilot course. So this is a plot of the questions in the ESCP Coordinator course. The Power BI software was used to analyze and calculate the average scores for quiz questions in this course. We then filtered on the data to analyze only the scores of the contractors who were offered training so that we could identify potential topics that they could benefit from. And so you can see on this slide that these are the questions on the x-axis, and we had 2 years of data. So 2019 is in dark blue and 2020 is in light blue. And these bar chart lines show the scores of each question. And we chose to examine the lowest scoring questions. So these are circled in red with average scores less than 60%. And this table summarizes the low scoring questions from the analysis on the previous slide. So it's shown in the right column of this table. We reviewed the questions and categorized them by learning criteria in the left column. So for example, for the first question, which is which one of the following options is not an erosion control BMP, we can see that this links to the learning criteria of distinguishing between erosion and sediment control BMPs. And by matching each question to learning criteria, we can see what criteria to focus on in the contractor training. Also, through discussion with our team, we decided to focus on the top 3 topics highlighted in blue for the virtual pilot. And with the training criteria selected, we also verified the link between data analysis and the top third-party inspection issues in the field. So recall the pie chart that Jennifer shared earlier. The table here shows the criteria that was identified from our analytics matched to the field observations. So for example, if we look at the second criteria that we got from the analysis, understanding BMPs used as sediment barriers, we can see that this links to a field observation of compost stocks and berms. And matching allows us to validate the criteria with the 3PI issues, and then we can recommend that these topics be addressed by the virtual pilot contractor training. And after selecting the topics to cover, we also evaluated the virtual pilot training using pre and post survey questions to try to measure learning. So we deployed a survey before the virtual training that allowed participants to respond to questions about the course topics and also about questions about themselves. And the same survey was offered after the training to see if there was any improvement in the scores of questions. We had 21 participants attend the pilot training. And for this survey, it was voluntary, but we did encourage that participants take it. But we did see that we had more participants before the training. And because the survey was anonymous and voluntary, we didn't have the same participants before and after. And though our sample size might be on the smaller side, this was our best attempt at measuring learning from the pilot course. So this slide shows the breakdown of participants' years of experience their scores by experience that we gathered from the surveys. The left side shows the pre-survey metrics. So the pie chart shows the different years of experience, and then the bar chart on the bottom shows scores by experience. So for example, if we look at the pre-survey pie chart, we see that 73%, or most of the pre-survey participants, have 0 to 2 years of experience. And when we look at the bar chart on the bottom, we can see that they score the lowest on average. We also see that participants with more work experience tended to score higher, and there is a relationship of more experience to higher scores. And then the right side shows post-survey results. So here we see that there are less survey takers, 8 versus 15 in the pre-survey, but a little more variety in their experiences. The average scores look similar to the pre-survey, with lower scores for less experience and higher scores for more experience. And these visualizations show the profession of the participants who took the survey. So pre-survey and post-survey, most people were project engineers, as you can see from the dark blue on the pie charts. We had some others who didn't specify their job type, and a laborer and a superintendent. And for average scores, we see that project engineers showed slight improvement in the post-survey, as well as did the other groups. And it's important to keep in mind the caveat that we don't have the same survey takers before and after, but hopefully when we look at the average scores, this provides a good indicator of the effect of the virtual course. And then the last attribute we looked at through the surveys was ESCP coordinator status. So this asks the question, does the participant have ESCP coordinator certification? And in both cases, about 2/3 of the people were certified, as you can see in the light blue of the pie charts. And so in the pre-survey, ESCP coordinators scored significantly better than those without certification. In the post-survey, we also saw a great improvement, to the people who did not have ESCP coordinator status, and an improvement to overall scores as well. We also assessed the scores of individual questions before and after the course. So these questions that were in the survey were designed to measure knowledge. Light blue is pre-survey and dark blue is post-survey. So average scores pre-survey were between 50 to 70%, whereas scores post-survey were between 60 to 100%. So we saw an improvement in each question with significant improvement for several questions. And then one point to mention is you can see on the right-hand side that this question had pretty poor scoring and performance. And we think that it was because it was a select all that apply type of question, which might have been confusing. So we dropped this one as an outlier. And also keep in mind when looking at these scores that we don't have the same learners before and after, but we can still look at average scores as an indicator of improvement. And in addition to looking at the scores by question, we also map questions to the 3 learning criteria that we identified earlier in the analytic portion. So we calculate the average scores for the questions related to those criteria. And so when we look at the learning criteria, we saw that scores improved slightly in the post-survey. So this was a positive observation. And the survey also asked the situational question to measure if learners can apply knowledge before knowledge gained from the course to an on-site type of situation. So the question asked participants what they would do in a certain type of situation, as you can read from the question on the screen. And it was intentional that this question had a best answer, but that the other option sounded plausible as well. So know that option 3 is the preferred option. Option 4 was also viable. Option 2 is less preferred and more risky, and option 1 is not preferred. So we saw that in the pre-survey, option 3 was a popular choice, and in the post-survey, a higher percentage chose option 3. So we hope that this is a positive indicator of improved decision-making after taking the training. And finally, in addition to looking at survey results, we also wanted to look at field performance of the contractors who attended the training. And because the course took place in October, this data is from less than a month after the training. The table shows the contractors selected for the virtual pilot. And on the right side of the table, we can see the average effectiveness score that Jennifer mentioned earlier. These were prior to the training taking place. That was analyzed in September. And then to the right of that score, we see the score 3 weeks after the training. So contractor D had a pretty significant 2% increase in their site score. And the score stayed the same for contractor B and slightly decreased for the other contractors. Because we're looking at data that's so shortly after the training, this might not be enough time to measure proper effectiveness. And we feel that there could be some other factors that affect the scores, like newer closing projects or projects changing from one phase to another. So we plan to continue to monitor these contractors and to measure the effect of the virtual training. So to summarize, we had many positive outcomes from the virtual training pilot, as shown when we analyzed the survey results. The scores improved across the post-survey in almost all the ways that they were measured. There was also improvement to the decision made in the situational question. The pilot course had a good turnout from the contractors, and in the feedback portion of the survey, we received positive feedback that the course was well received and that it was very informative. And other notable things about using a virtual training is that the course can be recorded and it can be shared, and it allowed us to offer a participation certificate. Thank you. So now Dustin will talk about the city's role in inspection and enforcement.
All right, can you guys hear me? All right, thank you, Ashley. So for me, I'll be talking about the construction inspections or the enforcement policy from the city. We're going through the construction inspection process. So for stormwater compliances, we'll have two main types of inspectors. You have your third-party inspection, which is the ones that Jennifer them do, and they'll inspect the permitted sites. So ones that have building permits, grading permits, as well as trenching permits. And during their inspections, they'll identify deficiencies that they see at sites. And the ones that they find that are problematic, at that point, they'll refer those to the Department of Facility Maintenance, Stormwater Quality Division, which is our division. And from there, we'll determine whose jurisdiction it is and refer those to the proper agency if that is not within our right to do enforcement. Next slide. The other ones will be your city inspectors. These ones will usually be your DPP inspectors. And for these guys, they'll inspect both permitted sites as well as unpermitted sites. And during those times, if they identify any violations during their inspections, they'll determine whose jurisdiction it is, if it's theirs or if it's another agency. And if it's another agency, they'll go ahead and refer those to those proper agencies. But if it's their jurisdiction, then they can implement enforcement actions right there on the spot. Next slide. All right, so the different types of regulatory agencies for the city stormwater compliancy, those ones will be, next slide, please. The Department of Planning and Permitting, where they'll deal with the things that are happening on site. So these will be your erosion sediment control plans, as well as your BMPs. That's your BMP installations, the BMP maintenance, as well as any documentation required for the stormwater quality rules related to, or the rules related to stormwater quality that the city had adopted recently in the past couple of years. Some of their enforcement tools will be they can issue stop work orders, as well as administrative fines and also daily fines. Next slide. So the other agency would be our agency, the Department of Facility Maintenance, Stormwater Quality Division. We'll handle the things that happen off-site. So these will be any discharges that enter the city's MS4, which is our drainage system, which can be concrete waste, tracking, or any type of pollutant runoff. Now for us, the city's MS4 is any drainage structure, as well as the roadways would also be included in that, any kind of conveyance of stormwater. Some of the types of enforcement that we have are letter of warnings, notice of violations, as well as notice of orders. Next slide. So I can't really speak on the Department of Planning and Permitting's enforcement process, but what I will do is kind of go through the stormwater's enforcement process. Next slide. So for our enforcement, the main one that we'll enforce on for any kind of pollutant discharge is the revised ordinance of Honolulu 14-12.23, which is basically the ordinance that prohibits any pollutant discharge into any of the city's stormwater systems. For these, the main two that we'll issue for the violation is NOV, or a notice of violation, which are always issued to first-time violators, where these kind of violations allow the offenders to go and correct the issue, whereas a notice of order are issued to repeat offenders, and those ones are always associated with some type of fine. Something to note is that for the city's enforcement on stormwater pollutant discharges, our minimum fine is $1,000, and they can go up as high as $25,000. Next slide. All right, so for these ones, some of our policies and processes is that we will issue violations to multiple people for the same violation. So this could be a property owner, a property manager, a business, a contractor, or a subcontractor. So if something happened at a site where a contractor had discharged off of the site, we'll issue the violation to both the contractor as well as the property owner. Now for us, the violations stay with either the person and or the property. So some hypotheticals would be, say if at a property owner hires a contractor, and during that construction, he has discharged off of the site. At that point, we'll issue both the property owner as well as the contractor the violation. Now, should that homeowner hire somebody else that comes to the site to work and they discharge off of the site, at that point, that'll be considered the property owner's second violation. So they would be issued a fine, where the contractor would be issued just a notice of violation. The same would apply where it sticks with the person or business. So in these situations, if a contractor is working at a site and they discharge off of that site, we would issue them the notice of violation if it was their first time. Should they go to another property and discharge off of that site, that would be considered their second violation. So at that point, fines would be implemented for that violation, although it did happen at two different sites. Next slide. So this is a graph where for the past 3 years, it's the different types of pollutant types that we've received complaints that have come from construction sites. And something to note is that the primary one that we usually see is sediment or concrete sediment. And this kind of ties into the same things that the third-party inspectors had noted on some of the BMPs that would have prevented these kind of discharges. Next slide. So for this slide, this shows the different types of enforcement actions that we've had in the past 3 years. So it goes from 2018 to 2020, and it goes left to right in escalation. So the no actions are things where we receive complaints, and when our investigators go out there, they haven't seen any kind of discharge. The letter of warning, these types of situations is there's suspicion that a discharge did occur, but they can't confirm where the discharge came from. And then you have your notice of violations, which are your first time offenders, and then your notice of orders where they are repeat offenders. Next slide. All right, so for this one, this is just a close-up of what's been happening this past year. So as you can see, for this year, for construction sites, we've had the 38 notices of violations, which would mean that they've had 38 first-time violators. And then you also have your 7 notices of orders. So these would be repeat offenses. Now, something to note is in that 7, it may not be 7 different people, where you may just have been, a person may have been gotten fined multiple times. So in this situation, I know of those 7, at least 2 of those are to the same person. And for those ones, they're both, that one person is getting fined $25,000 for each violation. So that's a total of $50,000. Next slide. All right, so conclusion. What we'll probably try to do, so the intent of this program with the whole training thing is to try to change the behavior of contractors through a different way other than enforcement. So trying to offer them that training opportunity to give them knowledge. The training was offered only a month ago. So what we'll do is we will continue to analyze the process, progress for these individuals through the 3PI inspections and see if there are any improvements. If we do see improvements, then it kind of shows that the training was a successful training. So we'll try to probably implement those or offer those to other contractors to try to see if that will also improve for their scores. Doing these things, they're always, there's always adjustments that you can make to improve it. So we'll probably look at that. And if any adjustments need to be made, then we'll probably implement that. However, if during this time we see that there's no change, or if it seems like they're trending down where they're not getting better, we'll probably have to reevaluate the whole training to see where we went wrong or what we could improve to hopefully help, but also probably look at our enforcement process and see what can we do to adjust it to probably increase our enforcement actions. Next slide. All right, so some of the resources that the city has is we have our stormwater quality website, which is at www.cleanwaterhonolulu.com, where we offer all types of resources. Next slide. This one would be the Learning Center, where we offer all different types of pamphlets manuals and tip cards, all related to construction as well as other things. Next slide. As well as our resources for rules related to water quality. And in these ones, they'll offer other manuals and brochures about the rules related to water quality. Something to note is that these resources are also offered in other languages. And then this one also offers trainings such as the ESCP coordinator. And we just wanted to let everybody know that, all of these things are available on our website at www.cleanwaterhonolulu.com. Next slide. All right, that's it for me. If anybody has questions, and I think there's been like 5, I think, so far.
Thank you guys so much for your presentation. So yes, we will open it up for the question and answer portion now. So Marvin has a question. When there is a state project, the owner that a contractor needs to obtain a permit from the city for work in the city's right of way, would the city fine the state? How will this be handled? And does the state fine the city for city projects that violations flow onto the state right of way?
All right. So for that one, the right of way that will be handled by a different type of agency. I believe that's the Department of Transportation Services. But in situations where there is a discharge to the city's drainage systems, I can't say that we will actually enforce on the state. That's something that we'll probably have to discuss with our people internally, but the contractor probably will get that fine for that. But that will be for a discharge. If you're looking for if they would fine them for any type of violation for not obtaining a right-of-way permit, I can't speak on that part. As far as the city being fined by the state, we do have an MS4 permit, an MPDS permit, which allows our stormwater to discharge to the state. Now, if somebody is discharging into our system and then that discharges into the state's waters, I do not believe we will get the violation, as our permit allows us to discharge to the maximum extent practicable. So in those situations, that discharge, if it did come to our system, we would hit them with a violation. And then if that also proceeded to get into the states, then the state may get hit, or the state may hit them with a violation. Now, it would depend on what agency. I would believe that would be somebody other than DOH. So DOH would probably still hit another state agency with a violation, but I'm not 100% sure. You'd have to ask them on that part.
Awesome, thank you, Dustin. Marvin has a couple of other questions. So has there been any violations being fined from city to state or vice versa?
From city to state?
Yeah, from cities to state or vice versa.
Not that I can think of. As far as from vice versa, from state to the city, I can't really think of any that we've actually issued anything to the state, to the best of my knowledge. As far as the city being fined by the state, I'm not too sure if it's from a discharge from our system, but the city has been fined from the state for discharges into state waters, yes.
Okay, a couple of other questions regarding fines. So who is the entity from the city that is issuing the fines, and how are they being collected?
So for those types of ones, if it's for violation, any city agency that issues a violation, that agency will be the one that will collect. So if we issue out fines, then we'll request them, or the violation says that they gotta send their payment to us. If they don't send the payment to us, then at that point, legal does get involved. So we'll send it to the Department of Corporation Counsel. At that point, they may implement other ways of collecting the fine, or restrict other city services from being allowed for those types of entities. That's kind of more of the legal part, yeah. Hopefully I was able to answer.
Marvin, Yeah, thank you, Dustin. And Marvin was asking these questions as they relate to if the fines go to the contractor primarily first or to the project owner.
Most times it will go to the contractors, mainly the person that does the discharges. However, what we've seen in the past is the situations that may arise is where you have the same property owner using different contractors and trying to get a pass on that way. So in those situations, we usually just issue them to them both. And at that point, it would be them to try to figure out who's going to pay that fine. But I believe with the new rules is it depends on if it's a legit project where they actually have building permits and things like that, then the people on the building permit will be responsible. So if it's an older builder, then at that point, the owner will be responsible for any discharges, as well as the contractor if they're the actual source of the pollutant discharge.
Thanks, Dustin. We have another question that asked, if there is a SWIP for a city project, will the SWIP B&P inspection form replace the city's ESCP Appendix C inspection checklist?
That I cannot answer. That would be a DPP question. I would believe that as long as the two things have the same information, they may allow it. But in those situations, it's best to ask the Department of Planning and Permitting, their building inspectors, to see if it will replace that BMP stuff.
As far as
Go ahead.
I think you have to do both for now. I think they are similar, and to me, they ask similar questions. It doesn't seem like there should be two, but in my experience, they usually do both because they're two separate permits for two separate entities that are asking for two separate things. So I would do both unless clarified by your DPP inspector.
Thank you both. Does anyone else? Oh, we have another question that just came in. So the city and state public projects have a number of different checks on BMPs, stormwater permits, etc., through the design and construction process. Do you see a significant difference in BMP implementation / performance between city and public projects versus private projects? Do you see the same contractors performing differently on public projects versus private projects?
I guess that's another me question. Can you bring that back up so I can see it again? To me, I feel like the BMP standards are the same for both public and private. It is a little more difficult to reel in some of the private contractors because they're smaller and generally don't have quite as much experience. So the learning curve is a little bit higher for them. And I feel like on the job sites, there's a lot more training involved to get them into compliance. But in general, the rules are the same with the city. The BMP standards are the same. The minimum requirements are the same. So in theory, they should be practicing and implementing in the same way. But like I said, the private entities are a little behind on the curve when it comes to retaining all of the BMP information and implementing them and installing them correctly.
Yeah, something to touch on that as well is for city projects, they're also held to their contract with the city for that project itself. So within our special provisions, and they'll require them to follow these BMPs. And usually with a public project, we have construction managers that are always there. So like for private ones, the third-party inspectors will go out every so often. Their building inspectors will go out every so often. Whereas on a public project, we usually will have somebody there all the time. If it's not a construction inspector or a construction manager. So in those situations, they would probably be held to a different standard, probably a higher standard than the private, because there's somebody always watching them. And because of their contract, those types of stuff where a private will get a violation, for a public project, they will get things where it would be withholding payments and things like that. So, or issuing stop works where they won't get their delay claims. So then they'll get liquidated damages. So for a public project, things can kind of just roll downhill if they don't abide by the stormwater compliance parts of it.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I think we answered all of the questions. Does anyone else have any questions that they want to ask our speakers at this time? If not, we're going to conclude the session. I'll just give a couple more seconds in case anyone has any questions. I think everyone's good to go. So I just want to thank you guys again, Dustin, Ashley, and Jennifer. This now concludes our session. The last session begins at 3 p.m., so please don't forget to visit one of our DOT public education booths to obtain your conference certificate. Additionally, there will be a post-conference questionnaire available following the last session that is worth 500 points upon completion, so please be sure to fill that out as well. I just want to thank everyone for attending and hope you have a great rest of the conference. Thank you again to our speakers. You guys did awesome.
Thank you.